So I finally got a hold of Carri Ann. I'm so excited. I think I stalked you on Twitter. Is that right? Was it Twitter that I stalked you on?
Probably, yeah. I feel
Right?
like we've been talking forever.
I hope we keep doing that because you're so much fun to talk to. You run an incredible travel blog, and it's something that I'm really passionately excited and interested in, even in this age of coronavirus, which I'm hoping someday we get to travel again. But
Absolutely.
I've just started becoming so much more dependent on my wheelchair, and in traveling, that makes me really question mark on how do you travel with a wheelchair. So that's why I wanted to reach out for you. If you're listening to this, when you get home or to a safe place, please go onto our show notes. Carri Ann's blog will be like front and center. You'll just click a button and you can go and read everything. And I really recommend the opinion page. That was probably my favorite. And I have a lot of questions for you about the
Thank
opinions
you.
because I was like,
They're my
yes.
favourite pieces to write as well. So I'm really glad that they've been real well received.
Very, and you're such a good writer. It's I think that's one of the things I enjoyed the most about your blog. A lot of people have a point of view or an opinion that they want to get out, but the writing can feel stilted, and your writing was so easy to read. I spent like an hour and a half this morning like reading almost every post I could.
Amazing. Thank you. Well, that's what I always say, that I am first and foremost a writer. I run a blog and I am a blogger, but when it comes to the technical side of blogging and SEO and that sort of thing, like that's not where my passion is. I just want to write.
Is there any way we could just like not deal with SEO and all the tags? Like that takes me the longest of any part of my job is tags and SEO.
Yeah, I feel you.
That's the brutal part. Okay. Is there any part you want to start with? Because I could start anywhere.
No, wherever you'd like to start, go for it.
Okay, well, I'm going to start pretending like we're all going to still be able to travel in the next 6 months. And then at the end, I kind of want to talk to you about how you had to switch with COVID and how everything had to change a little bit for you, or if it has changed for you, which I think it has after reading I'm sorry, but just like that one blog post you had about trying to go out with a wheelchair during COVID and trying to make sure people keep their distance, and like the mental gymnastics you have to do in a wheelchair of how do I know that someone's going to be over there or not walk into my lap, or that was really good.
I'm glad you enjoyed it. But yeah, that is a total thing. Like I found myself with this kind of extra sense now. Like I can be going down the street and I'll almost know those people at the other end of the street, whether or not they're going to move. I'll kind of be able to tell from how they're behaving, which is not necessarily a thing that I want.
But you can't have a conversation in a wheelchair. Like if you're in a crowded area, like trying to keep a conversation going over here while you're psychically trying to link over here with everyone around you is
absolutely, yeah.
Okay, I will start with, what have you found to be the most accessible city you've traveled to?
Barcelona, without question, always. It's always the one that it does get held up quite a lot within sort of European circles as one of the most accessible cities in the world. I kind of knew this when I was traveling there, but I also just really wanted to go there. We were sort of, right, we know it's going to be accessible enough, so let's just go and see what we find. And actually just found that all of those things that you have to plan usually, like how can I find a restaurant that I can get through the door of? How can I find transport to get me to the beach? They were just all accessible. They were just, even the tiniest little old tapas bar that we went in, I was like, okay, I need to go to the toilet, and there is no way there's going to be an accessible toilet in this place. And they were like, oh no, I'm sorry, the toilet's upstairs. I was like, right, okay, figures, we'll work something out. Oh no, there's an elevator at the back of the restaurant. And I was like, are you kidding? Like this place looked ancient.
That right there brings a really important point, because this is the big argument against making places accessible, is that it's old. We would be ruining the architecture if we made it accessible. Like that's what I always hear about ramps, or like, I was just in Paris a few years ago, and like that idea of like the only way to get to a bathroom was down like 3 flights of stairs.
Yeah. I do not take that excuse that we can't adapt because we have an old building or whatever, because I've seen it done. I've seen it done in old, you know, we have what we call listed buildings here in the UK. So that's when they're of a particular age or whatever, that they're protected by government legislation. And they say, oh no, we're listed, so we can't have a ramp, or we can't have a lift installed or whatever. But you know, the Houses of Parliament is one of the most important buildings in this country, one of the oldest, and it's accessible. And it has accessible toilets, it has larger changing places toilets, it has lifts. So they can do it.
That's it's such a good point, and it's the argument I get into with temporarily abled people a lot, which is, but it would ruin the architecture if you had Notre Dame and like you made it accessible. It would ruin everything. Well, now, you know, obviously Notre Dame is not open to the public, but like I've actually gotten to these conversations with temporarily abled people who get very passionate about maintaining the architecture to the exclusion of people who are not temporarily able.
And it doesn't have to ruin the architecture. It can be done in a really beautiful and sensitive way and in keeping. You know, there's a building that I've been to a couple of times in Westminster in London, which is, it's a conference venue, but it's also the Institute of Civil Engineers. So you'd hope that they'd do something special with accessibility. And they have, like, you pull up outside this building and it's like the big grand wide stairs to the door, and you think, right, how is there like a side entrance or something? How am I getting in here? And the stairs actually disappear. Like they sort of slide in on each other at one side to reveal a platform lift that takes you up.
My goodness.
It's so special. I got so excited.
That is really cool. I say, you scared me for a minute because I thought it's like one of those designs that like I see able-bodied people like put up, or temporarily able people put up, of like the stairs, but there's the ramp that is integrated into the stairs. There's no hand, like there's, I'm like, I would die. Like, and I was like, oh no, please don't tell me that that's the one that you thought was like,
no, so it was,
so scared of that.
Lifts, but they'd put the stairs in, so it was in keeping. So
it's so beautiful.
And it was like something like futuristic. It was just really cool. So yeah, can be done.
That makes me so excited. It's like, it really just shows that it's a lack of imagination rather than, yeah. Okay, so we were talking about Barcelona and that it's much more, and what you're talking about with access of like, it's all accessible. Like even my hometown here in the Bay Area in California is not like that. Like I couldn't have that kind of access even where I live in a metropolitan area. Like that's jaw-dropping, like to have that kind of ability.
I think what it is a very good legacy from when Barcelona hosted the Olympics and Paralympics. So that was obviously quite a long time ago. I think it was maybe even in the 90s, possibly.
But
I don't know.
That's such an interesting thing. Like if they host the Paralympics, then of course you have to consider a whole bunch of disabilities and
and some places have done it better than others. You know, London put in a lot of temporary accessible infrastructure for 2012. But it was temporary, and a lot of it went away again afterwards. And Barcelona clearly adapted and did it well. And it is still like, if you have a conversation with any kind of travel blogger in this field, they'll tell you that Barcelona is like really held up as the place where we go.
I'm so excited to go eventually.
Amazing. Well, it's always like, if I get a lot of people who get in touch with me, maybe they're traveling for the first time since they've become disabled, or they haven't been abroad before, and it's always one of the first places I recommend.
That sounds like a good starter. So how do you handle let's see, how's the way to phrase this? Whenever you're going somewhere new, how do you scope it out before you go? How do you plan for how accessible? Are you wheelchair full-time? Are you? 100%?
Yeah. So I have cerebral palsy. I use a wheelchair full-time outside of the house. Inside of the house, I do a bit of kind of shuffling, knee walking, all of that sort of thing. But yes, in terms of traveling, I use a wheelchair full-time. I have a manual chair that I sometimes use a power add-on with, depending on where I'm going, what the terrain's like, all of that sort of thing. And I mean, in terms of scoping out, like I've written on this quite extensively. So I don't know if you saw, I have what I call a wheelchair accessible travel survival guide
Yeah,
on the
please
blog.
go right there to her website. Like it will be like you go to show notes. I swear there'll be a button, and I will even like put buttons directly to these guides because they're so helpful.
So that talks through what I do, my process of organising travel. Now, I'm not saying that this is the definitive guide for everybody, but it's just my personal process. And I thought, you know what, I might as well document it. It might help other people. So I try to start by thinking purely about where I want to go without thinking about accessibility at all. You know, just take that completely out of the equation. If I could go anywhere, where would it be? Because I think there's a danger that we get so anxious and het up about accessibility and about, well, what's it going to be like away from home? And that is understandable. But that means that sometimes we can compromise on what we actually want out of a trip. And that ends up not being a priority because the priority is on the wheelchair access and the getting it right. And, you know, of course, that is important. We can't go places that aren't accessible. But I just kind of think, you know, why do I want to travel? What am I actually going to get out of this trip? So I start with that. And then I just spend a long time on the internet, to be perfectly honest. So it might be just Google searching, it might be using like specialist Facebook groups that are about accessible travel. In the UK, there are a couple of websites that I use that are linked to from that blog post. So I don't know how much you know about sort of what I do outside of blogging. So my day job usually in non-pandemic times is working for a company called Accessible. They're a national disability organisation in the UK. And their access guides for UK travel is what I use to research because they are the most detailed pieces of information. So they'll go around any kind of building that the public might visit. So it's not limited to travel or tourism. It's, you know, hotels, hospitals, universities, shops. But they actually have somebody visit every single place and record down to the detail of exactly how wide the door is, how steep the ramp is, what the lighting levels are like, what the background noise is like, that sort of thing.
That's brilliant. I want that so bad here. Our ADA is like such a laughable thing. Like it's such a guide of suggestions with almost no teeth.
Absolutely. And that's what we find with the law in the UK as well. And the thing is that everybody's different. You know, what I need in an accessible accommodation might be really different to what you need. And yet we both use a wheelchair. That's without thinking about other impairments, you know, people with visual impairments, people with hearing loss, all sorts of things. So that's why in particular Accessible focus on the detail, and they send someone to check so that we can guarantee that this information is accurate.
That's amazing.
But it is UK only at the moment. But if anybody wants to have a look at UK access information, it's accessable.co.uk.
I will ask you to send me that so that I can add that into. I'm just hoping there's some way to make a branch of that in other countries. That'd be amazing to like copy that. And
quite a lot. We get asked when we're going to go international, and our answer is always, you know, we've still got so much work to do in the UK. And it didn't feel right to kind of move on to other places without having really smashed our job here, to be honest.
It's just such, like, when there's something like that, there's, you know, passionate people in other countries that can take a really close look at what you're doing and then create their own in that space.
So
that would be,
I research using resources like that, and I'll start probably looking at accommodation first, because I figure, you know, if I've got that nailed down, the other bits can be added on quite easily.
Now, how do you find good accommodation for wheelchair? And at a good price? That's why I am a cheapskate. I will try to find a bargain. That's the hard part for finding accommodation that will be wheelchair accessible.
Absolutely. In recent years, I've tended more towards self-catering accommodation, so apartments and that sort of thing. because I find that's just a bit more accessible to me, having more space and being able to keep my own routine, having to not go for breakfast at a certain time and all of that sort of thing. But I don't think there's any kind of magic answer. I think it's sort of, as I say, settling on your destination and then going, right, where can I look? Where can I Google? Is there any Facebook groups about this particular destination where people who live there will have this knowledge? What's TripAdvisor saying? What's Google saying? What's the hotel's website saying? Have they got pictures and things like that? But crucially, confirming in detail with the accommodation exactly what it is they have got. Either on telephone or email, but usually I like to have an email backup so that if something does go wrong, you've got written proof of what you've requested. And then I repeat that process for restaurants and bars, things to do, all of that sort of thing, until I've just got a bit of a picture of, you know, right, this actually looks like a viable destination for me to go to. There's plenty to do. There's accommodation that works, etc. And then it's sort of a case of confirming everything and booking your transit and everything else. So because this is a long and drawn out process, and it's quite daunting if you haven't done it before, I have actually just created sort of a travel planner which breaks down my steps into 30 separate steps. So the idea is that you could spend a month spending maybe 10-15 minutes each day doing one point of research or one point of booking, and by the end of the month you should have pretty much your trip sort of fully formed. So that is available as a downloadable PDF from my website, and anybody who subscribes to my mailing list, which is completely free of charge, no spam, nothing like that, will be emailed a copy of that guide. So you'll be able to see in detail how I plan and how that might be able to help you plan.
And I am a subscriber, so I can absolutely speak to this. I don't like to subscribe to things. I hate getting things in my email, and yours is like one of the only things that I actually read all the way through.
Amazing, thank you.
Yeah, no, I can absolutely attest to there's no spam, and it is a really good, like everything you've sent out has been full of really helpful information.
Thank you.
So that's my I'm not being paid to say this, by the way. This is not just sponsored. No. This is not sponsored in any way. I'm just deeply curious about traveling again, and hopefully after COVID. But I loved traveling. So the happiest I ever was visiting new places. And as my disability has gotten significantly worse, this has scared me, especially with airline travel. I've always been very concerned about being on a plane, because to go anywhere, like, you know, you're so lucky where you are. You have so many like vastly different places to visit with a fairly short flight. To go to your country takes me almost 11 hours in the plane, like 10 to 11 hours depending on where I'm landing. And for someone with Ehlers-Danlos, I dislocate and then I have POTS, so I faint a lot, and it becomes traumatic on a flight. And I'm always concerned, like, how do you have a wheelchair on a plane? Like, if I can't get to the bathroom, I mean, I use a cane when I'm on the flight, but that's been problematic. So like the aisles are way too small to wheel, and it concerns me.
So obviously I don't know much about how it works flying internally in the US. I've only got limited experience of traveling to your country.
That's okay. I totally get it.
But in my experience of travel, so pretty much every flight I've taken, on request they have a skinnier wheelchair, like they call it an aisle chair, so that it will fit down the aisle, basically, to enable you to get to the toilet, etc. They usually have to be pushed by the flight attendant, so you have to request it and they have to push you. It's not the most dignified process, it's not the most comfortable process, but it opens up air travel certainly for me and for other people of a similar ability. I think aviation is an industry that can definitely do better when it comes to accessibility in a huge way, and I know that there are a lot of very hardworking people campaigning for aviation to be more accessible, but I also know that it's a long haul. It's not something that's going to be solved quickly, and it's perhaps not been taken as seriously as it might have been. My worry is that with what the pandemic has done to aviation, this is going to be even lower on the priority list.
That's frightening. Um, right now, it's so like the best I could hope for is like, hey, you get to get onto the plane first,
Yeah.
with the small children who are running into my legs, or like that's always been, as I dislocate by people touching me or by pointing at things. So when someone's
Yeah.
small children are running around my canes and they
Yeah.
hit my legs, yeah, that's gonna be a long flight. For public transportation, I think that's one of the things that even crosses our discussion about travel. It's just our discussion about access and being a disabled person in the world. And here in the Bay Area and in San Francisco, our transportation is horrible for disability. Our BART trains, which is the way that you get around the Bay Area,
Yeah.
many of the stops, the wheelchair access doesn't work, or the elevators. Sorry,
Yeah.
words. The elevators are out of service in various stations. So when you're traveling they'll tell you as you're getting to the station whether the elevator works or not.
Oh,
And
that's helpful.
yep, and often they have human waste in them, and it's like it's so to the point that I won't travel even in my own area unless someone can drive me. I won't take public transportation because it's too much of a roll of the dice. Have you? I'm guessing it's better where you are, because I know Europe takes their train systems way more seriously than the United States does.
Yeah. I mean, where I live personally, so I live in relative countryside, I guess. I'm in sort of quite a large town, but in a rural area, in the north of England, and we are always far behind the cities when it comes to innovation. And so, we have a bus network where I live, which is accessible, but it took a long time for it to be accessible.
Oh.
But it's generally just so infrequent. Like we're not served well by public transport where we live. Nobody is served well, disabled or not. That I don't use it because, I look at my wheelchair, I look at my power pack, I think I could actually be where I need to be quicker than sitting and waiting for this bus. So I'm going to do that. But no, in terms of like the train network, so I travel by train a lot in normal times, particularly for work. And again, it's not perfect. It's a system that really does need an overhaul, but generally it works. I mean, I've become confident enough to travel completely independently by train, and I do that usually on a weekly basis. We have to request in advance ramp access for the train.
How far in advance do you have to ask for that?
So it will vary by train operating company, because of course our trains aren't all run by one lovely centralised company. We've got,
Wouldn't that be nice?
tons of them across the country, but it's anywhere between 24 and 48 hours. Now, the official rules will tell you that you don't have to request assistance in advance, and if you arrive without requesting it, you will still be assisted and you will still be able to get on the train. But in practice, that doesn't always work, or you might come across an attendant that isn't very happy that you haven't pre-booked your assistance. It depends where in the country you are. Like my local station are lovely, know me really well, are always like, morning Carri Ann, the ramp's down there waiting for you, go get yourself coffee, how's the family? It's lovely. But by the same token, they only have 3 members of staff on at any one time for a mainline station. So actually, I always request assistance when I'm travelling from there, because they're really nice people. They look after me, and I don't want to make their jobs any more difficult. I don't want to just sort of turn up and go, surprise! You might already have another 6 bookings to deal with this morning, but I'm here as well. Where the system sometimes fails is getting to the other side. So even though I've pre-booked, I have had instances where the ramp hasn't arrived to get me off the train, which is scary, which is, certainly not ideal. Yeah, I'm usually traveling for meetings, so I can be on quite a tight time scale. And I have had to rely on strangers literally picking up my wheelchair and carrying me off the train. And then what happens now? Because social distancing, that's not going to be a thing. I'm not going to feel confident enough to let a complete stranger come that close to me and touch my wheelchair and potentially touch me to lift me off a train. So this is why I'm doing a lot of the work that I'm doing at the moment, because I just feel that so many of us are anxious about what life and travel is going to look like on the other side of this. And there's not a huge amount of information out there to tell us what that might be. You know, I'm no expert by any means, but I just thought somebody needs to share this information. People need and want this information. So if I can try and pull it together and get it out there and help people with it, then that's what I'm going to do.
That's amazing you're able to take that time and that you are doing this. It's so helpful. I'm in a space where the information is so politicized that even our health department, which is supposed to be non-political, is now been overrun, and we don't actually get the information, and our actual numbers aren't being reported anymore to our CDC. So it's we're in a space here where we don't actually know what the numbers are. We're very everything's so confusing here. Like even getting a test is super confusing here. So yeah, sorry, that was my little rampage. I will stop now on my rampage, and we'll get back to travel. Is there any place you wouldn't travel to?
Oh, I don't know really. My husband really wants to try coastal areas in Italy, which I'm apprehensive about.
Oh, yeah.
I don't think they're very accessible.
Yeah, but my mom wanted to go on a trip to, I think it's the Three Sisters or the Five Sisters. It's all uphill hiking. And I was like, oh, I'd love to go on that trip, but that's never going to happen. I love you, Mom. No.
Saying that, you know, we went to Rome a few years ago. We were both really, really wanted to go to Rome and had done for quite a while. And I was like, oh, but I've read all these horror stories and cobbles, and is it going to be accessible, and what are we going to, and he was like, will you just book the trip? We will find a way, and we will manage. And that that is how I travel. And I recognize the privilege in that statement. I recognize that not everybody is able to just go, well, I'll work it out. That is just part of me and who I am, and part of the people around me as well. I'm lucky to have a lot of supportive people around me who go, well, let's try, and if you struggle, we'll work it out, you know. And actually Rome was one of the best trips I've ever had in my life. So yeah, again, not perfectly accessible. You need a bit of a sense of adventure. You need to be willing to deal with cobblestones.
Okay, how do you do cobblestones? Please help me. How?
Front wheel attachment. So I'm pretty sure you can get them I'm pretty sure it's US made. So it's called Freewheel.
Okay.
I'm going to write a blog post on this because so many people ask me about
writing this down.
So,
Freewheel.
So there will be a blog post coming out soon. But yes, it's called Freewheel, and it clamps onto your foot plate. And it's a big central wheel. So you might see it if you've seen some of the photos of me in my wheelchair on my blog. You might see it on the front. And it lifts the two small front wheels up off the ground. So you've sort of turned your wheelchair into like a three-wheeled thing. Because it's so big, it's got a big surface area, it just deals with cobbles and grass and things like that much better.
That's amazing.
I've
learned something so new now.
And I will be writing about it soon. So.
I'm so excited. That's been my biggest fear about wheelchair. And like, as Paris is my favorite city of all time. And I also loved Florence as well. It was like, my husband, it's like at the time I was still using a cane, and we're looking at each other as we knew wheelchair was coming like really fast. And we're like, how are we going to, like Venice, we were just staring at each other the whole time going, this might be the last time we do Venice.
Yeah, I mean, it's not, you know, it's not magic. You still get a bit of bumps and stuff like that, but it does make it much easier. And I did Florence with that wheel on the front and with a power pack on the back of my chair.
Wow. Okay. I want to see the Uffizi Gallery before I die again. Like that was one of the best experiences of my life. I need to go back. I need to see that again.
There you go. Freewheel. I guess price point, they're kind of mid-range. In this country, they're about £400. I don't know what that would.
That's not bad compared to how much I paid for my power pack. Like my power pack was like $4,000. Like it was insane.
And I use my Freewheel every single day. I've had it for 4 years. Wow. I've used it every single day. I've done minimal repairs on it in the meantime.
They need to like sponsor you.
Yeah, I'm going to reach out.
They really need to sponsor you. That's
reach out, see if we can do a collab.
One of the things that shocked my husband is, it was the first time I used a wheelchair at all, was when we were in Italy and I was in too much pain to stand. And that's like, I was saying, I was going to ask you in just a minute, was the language barrier. Like this lovely person at a like monastery up on the top of a hill above Florence. And it was like the most out of the way place. And my husband and I we're archaeology nuts. We're history buffs. And it was this area that we just desperately wanted to see, was the Etruscan ruins. And we're like, oh my gosh, we got to see this. But by the time we got there, I was crying, and I do not cry in public. And I was sobbing. And this lovely man came up my Italian is non-existent. He was so sweet. And we just were sign languaging and like pantomiming. It was before Google Translate. And we were like pantomiming back and forth. And he's like, Signora, wait. And he went running back and came back with this awesome wheelchair that had like rabbit mode and turtle mode. And there's like a rabbit and a turtle.
Yeah,
and I just looked at my
wheelchair with those controls on.
Awesome. I just looked at my husband. I just put it on rabbit and just waved goodbye. The whole place was accessible in a way I'd never seen before. Like all the Etruscan ruins, I could do everything my husband could do without even thinking about it. Oh my gosh, please. I will send you pictures. It was one of the beautiful, peaceful, stunning places of my life. Like I was just humbled. Like you go somewhere where it's like, this was before the Romans. Like, my God. And it's still standing.
Amazing. Definitely send me info because I need to go.
I will, but this is what's so important about what you're doing is so many of us with disabilities, we don't see that this is possible until someone shows us it's possible.
Absolutely. And that is why I do what I do. That is also, I'm lucky enough to get some hosted trips, to get some sponsored posts and all of that sort of thing. But that's not why I do it. I do it for the emails that I get from people who say, I read this and I booked my first trip in 7 years since I became disabled based on your review. And that honestly makes me cry. I'm like, that is it. That is what this is for. Because I fell into working in travel. I was working on a supermarket checkout and just applying for anything and everything because I was unbelievably bored. And I fell into it, and I fell into writing through that. And I was lucky to be working with people who saw something in me that I didn't necessarily see in my sort of 18-year-old inexperienced self. And it's brought me to where I am today, and I adore traveling more than anything else. But traveling even just to the next town, like there is a review on my blog where I stayed in a cottage that was like 20 miles from where I lived, and we had the best weekend. We found new accessible walks, and it was just lovely. So when I talk about travel, I'm not necessarily meaning pack a backpack and take on the world. But I just think for our mental and physical health, travel has enormous benefits, and it isn't always easy, but it is always worth it. And if I can help and support and encourage other people to do that, then, job done from my point of view.
What have you found as the important part of traveling for yourself?
For me, I guess broadening horizons a bit and just getting out of the daily grind of it. I am an overworker. I am an overdoer. I'm not very good at listening to my body, and tends to
I mean, seriously, don't raise your hand if you're driving, but raise your hand if you are a disabled person who just totally vibed with that.
going, doing until I completely crash.
That is something we need to explore in this podcast, because every disabled person I've talked to is like, I overwork, I don't listen to my body. I'm like, is this a thing that we just feel like we need to earn our place in the world? Like, is that our drive to like overwork?
I think there is definitely some of that, and I think yeah, for me definitely. I think there's maybe a little bit of internalized ableism where I'm going, I just need to be the best at this and that and the other one. I do everything.
Sorry, it just hit me, but yes.
Travel makes me stop, makes me slow down, makes me put my bloody phone down. And I have a love-hate relationship with my phone, bordering on addiction. Makes me just kind of feel my place in the world a bit better and go, but also Sorry, I'm totally going off on a tangent.
Have you listened to our podcast? Do you know how I am the queen of tangents? Please, tangent.
For me, it is about getting out of my comfort zone, which is one of the most powerful things I think anybody can do for themselves. Is just to do something that you're not comfortable with. Travel somewhere that you've never been before. Do something that you think you can't do. And I think accessible travel encapsulates all of that, because you always start going, oh my God, this is impossible. I can't find a hotel. I can't find the transport. How am I going to get on the plane? Is my wheelchair going to get broken? Am I going to get insurance? It's like the odds are against you before you've even started. And when you actually get through all of that and you get there and you are somewhere, like you were in the gorgeous place in Italy, or like I remember being on a rooftop in a hotel bar in Rome, like overlooking the city, and just going, we've done it. We've got here. Despite all of that, despite everything, we have done it. Nobody else has done it for us. And that is an amazing feeling.
There's a sense of awe that it's hard to find if you're in the same place at the same, and again, we're talking privilege. Like, it's a privilege to be able to travel. And it doesn't have to be six. I think that's one of the things that I've always tried to dispel people of is I'm a cheapskate. I hate spending money.
Yeah.
And for traveling from the United States to Europe, which we used to do once or twice a year, I did for work. I would never spend more than $2,000 or $3,000 for a 9-day trip that included airfare and hotel. And I think people think it's like $10,000 or $20,000. They've never priced it out. And there's ways to like do this pretty cheap, but it's still privilege. Like, to be able to afford $2,000 and to be able to take like 7 days off work, that's privilege. But it's a sense of awe that I don't know if you can catch a different way than just getting outside of your comfort zone. Like you said, just like spacing outside of everything and just feeling like, oh my gosh, this exists.
Totally. And, this is a whole completely different world that exists outside of my world. And this is how people live in this world. And
yes.
I get to spend like 3 days kind of living a little bit like what they do. But, I'll go back to, yes, it is a privilege to travel, but travel doesn't have to mean long distance. Travel doesn't have to mean flights and days and weeks. And, a day trip to somewhere close but that you've never been to before, I think gives you just as much benefit.
I mean, with as you and I are both having to be very careful during COVID, I'm immunocompromised, and I was missing that sense of awe. So we got in a car and we just we have a moonroof, so I just put the moonroof down and we just drove through the redwoods.
Yeah.
I mean, it was not standing, in the middle of Paris street at midnight, but it was really amazing. It really kind of reset my, like, I don't know if you're losing time, but I'm losing time here. Like, it's like Groundhog Day.
And our worlds have been made so much smaller. Life feels so much smaller. And, I used to moan quite a lot about work travel and commuting and being on trains all of the time and, getting home late. But I miss that. I actually miss the independence of just rocking up and getting on the train on my own. And, trying to work on a laptop while you've got a screaming child sat next to you or whatever. I miss all of those things.
I can't believe missing that, but I mean, I have kids at home, so I've got that one covered. Yeah. My world didn't change as much as everyone else's, except there's more people in my house. Like, what you're seeing behind me is 90% of my world is this room.
Yeah.
And I wanted to talk to you about something not travel related, but it's on your blog, so I feel like it's fair game. Your backyard.
Yes. Yeah.
I love that you have this retreat at your own home. And I know, again, we're speaking super privilege here. We both have backyards. We both have outdoor space that's fenced in. No one else comes in that we don't invite, but you have yours accessible. That sounds gorgeous.
So it's been such I really recognize the privilege of it, because I spent so long without it. Like, before I lived in the house that I lived in like a 1-bedroom flat with no outside space at all. And I love to be outside, especially when the weather's good. It doesn't happen very often where I live. It rains quite a lot. So when we had a freak heat wave at the beginning of like our lockdown, and I just want to be outside 24/7. I just want to be out there and enjoying it. And my husband in a former life was a landscape gardener. So when we moved into the house, he had all these grand plans for the garden. Because it was his job at the time, however, he'd come home and be like, can't really be bothered now, I've been working all day.
Yep.
It took quite a long time, probably about 4 years, to get it to the iteration that you're having.
It's gorgeous. The pictures are stunning.
But yes, I adore my garden, and it was my lockdown retreat. It was my way of being outside and in the elements, and again away from technology, when life felt even more small, when we were literally complete, you know, we're sort of going outside a little bit more now. We're still being very careful, but at this point we were completely isolated and only leaving the house to walk the dog. So I was just living outside for sort of 14-15 hours a day, only going inside to sleep.
It's so nice if you can get a Wi-Fi signal outside and just, yeah. I have my little spinny chair that I can sometimes get out to, and I'll just sit there and watch I have chickens, and I'll just watch my chickens and type and get everything done there.
Yeah, no, I love it. It's made a really big difference to this whole crazy experience. I think I would have really struggled without it. But you know, again, if somebody said to me, how did you create an accessible garden? Well, we just did our own thing. We just sort of went, well, we could put a ramp there, we could put some low seating there, and it's kind of evolved. I guess one benefit to the fact that it's taken quite so long is that it's evolved as it's gone on, and we've really been able to work out what we need from this garden without kind of doing it all at once and then going, oh, actually I wish we'd done this bit here. So I'll let him off for that one.
I like, if you're listening to this and you are living in an apartment, I bow down, especially if you have children in a small apartment or pets in a small apartment, or you're just going nuts in a small apartment. I bow down. This is incredibly hard for you guys. But if you are looking at how to make your space accessible, Pinterest is my world. And you can go on there and type in universal design, and it's amazing how many ideas they have. It's not just something you have to hire an architect for. There's like a lot of really cool stuff that you can find to make your space around you a little bit more usable, which I loved. Now, can you, or do you want to talk about virtual reality and COVID and travel?
So yeah, I can see a little bit of that. I don't have a huge, so I don't know, has this come from my newsletter that came out today?
Oh, well, ish. I saw it, and it just made me smile because we had bought Google Daydream, which I think was $100, and okay. And I'm obsessed with it. It has limitations, absolutely, but I'm obsessed with going places. And yes, since I can't right now, I live in Google Earth right now with like the Google, like with the Daydream thing on my face, and just like you get like a 360 bubble basically, and you can kind of walk around with like quotations, like you smooth the arrow around, and I'm not, it's so cool. I got to go to Petra, I got to go to Machu Picchu. It was like, it's such an interesting way to travel when you can't travel.
Definitely. I mean, I do think that's, you know, it is something that we can sort of thank the pandemic for, is that so much more online stuff is just so much more accessible now. You know, I've been doing a little bit of work with Airbnb. So Airbnb have launched Airbnb experiences. That's something that they were doing before all this, but they've launched online experiences now. So you can have a cooking lesson with somebody via Zoom, or you can do a yoga workout, or, you know, and they have a certain set of them they launched a couple of weeks ago that are specifically run by disabled hosts, or run with accessibility in mind. So I did a
fascinating.
It's really cool. It's really cool. And they're actually just, I think this week they're starting to host some with Paralympians. So they're bringing the Olympic and Paralympic experience online because obviously the Tokyo Games were cancelled. So they're doing a few different sessions with different Paralympians on the things that they do and they're into. So yeah, that just means that you can experience all of this stuff with kind of local experts, again, without leaving your home.
Yeah, I've heard that Airbnb was such a great way for when we almost went on our trip to London this year. We were so close. It was scheduled for March 12th. So that was the week that we locked down and that the United States locked down flights going international. It was like that day we were supposed to leave. But when we were scheduling it, I ended up booking our hotels, or not our hotels, but our spaces to stay on Airbnb specifically because they had like sections that told me if my wheelchair was going to work or not in that space. And I thought that was so cool. It's like any other site I was looking at to find a room or a hotel room did not have that feature. I would have to research each place. So I was digging Airbnb. I have issues with Airbnb living in the Bay Area where they've really taken over a lot of our apartments and spaces, and we have a housing crisis because of Airbnb. But I'm like, this thing they did good.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. No, the online experience is really interesting, and there's a few different sort of themes and things going on. They're quite a low price point from what I've seen. You know, it might be sort of like £10 or something to have like a session with a disabled fitness instructor or something like that. So it's just kind of something
That's cool.
Yeah.
I want so much more information. And I know that we're all differently able. Like, I hate that phrase, but we all have our disabilities make us you and I both use a wheelchair, but my arms dislocate all the time. So we would not be able to do the same exercise, but I would love more like exercises like that with exercise classes, things online that'd be like, hey, if you're bed bound for right now, here's some Pilates things you could do. Or
So I'm going to get to one of my absolute favorites. So I don't know if this guy thinks like I'm his stalker because I recommend his YouTube channel to everybody.
Yes, I will write him down.
I promise I'm not on commission. I just discovered this channel at the beginning of lockdown. So I really wanted to get into wheelchair yoga. I'd never ever done it before. I asked for some recommendations on Twitter and one of my friends recommended. So the YouTube channel is called Adapt to Perform. And it's run by a disabled guy called Ben who has had a spinal cord injury, is a personal trainer. He does daily live streamed wheelchair workouts. But as in the name, adapt to perform, he's always very good at being like, right, if you can't do this way, then just do it this way. Here's an alternative for you. And he's got loads of different workouts on there. I literally have worked out almost every single day in my home purely because of his YouTube channel, and I had never ever done anything like that before. So
wow,
there's a lockdown silver lining from me.
I'm excited now. I'm after I finish editing this video, I will head on over to his.
Amazing.
We only have 10 minutes left and I still have like half my questions. So I'm hoping you'll be willing to come back on another time.
Of course, anytime.
Oh, good. So is there anything I didn't cover that you are just like desperate to make sure it gets out like right now?
So I think, so you mentioned earlier sort of talking about what changes I've had to make to like the work I've been doing and things. So at the beginning of sort of coronavirus and the pandemic, I was like, oh my God, I am a travel blogger. What is this going to do to me, to my brand, to my niche? Now, travel blogging, as I've said earlier, is sort of a second job / hobby I am full-time employed. So again, privileged that this was not my only source of income, but still it's a huge passion of mine. And so, you know, I was like, what am I going to do? So I literally just stepped away, you know, took a few weeks just to not write, not blog, have some time off. And then, you know, gradually, as restrictions and things started easing, I just thought there is still a need for this information. In fact, there's even more of a need for this information now because, you know, disabled people are going to travel again one day and they're going to be even more anxious. They're going to be even more nervous. There's going to be even more that they need to know about. So one of the things that I've done is I've launched a new series which I'm calling Safe Accessible Travel. And I have interviewed hotels and holiday cottages, primarily in the UK, there's one in France, so that they can tell us what they're putting in place to make their accommodations safer for disabled guests. So that's anything from the training that they've taken to their cleaning procedures, if they've adjusted check-in and check-out times, what kind of cleaning products they're using, what's open nearby.
You hit such an important point with the what cleaning I have mast cell activation disorder. What the cleaning products means what kind of day I'm gonna have.
Yeah, absolutely. So just because, you know, I wouldn't book a hotel without having this information. Now I wouldn't book anywhere without knowing, yeah, when the last guest was in there, how thoroughly the room was cleaned, you know, what training has the owner had so that they can make sure that I'm safe. And I thought, well, I can't be the only one. I put some tentative stuff on Twitter just saying, you know, does anybody want this, or is it just something that my brain's cooked up? You know, when you're so close to something, when it's a passion project, it's hard to know sometimes.
You are a brave person to go on Twitter to ask what people think. That is a scary, mean place.
You know, I mean, maybe I'm lucky. I have a lot of lovely people who support me on Twitter, and that tweet alone, when I just said, you know, I'm going to do this. Do you want it? And what would you like to know? Reached. It was about 20,000 impressions. So I was like,
wow,
okay, there's some leverage here. I went through some of the places that I'd stayed at previously and reviewed on the blog, and just emailed them and said, look, I've got a list of questions here. If you're willing to answer them, can you send them back to me and we'll publish them on the blog? And we've got 2 live so far. So there's one which is wheelchair accessible glamping, so glamorous camping, in Wales, in Safari Town, in the Welsh countryside. And then we've just published another one, which is log cabin stays in the Derbyshire countryside. And I've got at least another 4 coming up, perhaps more, depending on what happens. So that just a way in which I can try and help people at the moment who need this information and who really don't feel confident about traveling again, you know, to say, right, okay, you're probably still not going to go anywhere right away, but if and when you do, know that this is the sort of thing that people are putting in place to keep you safe. You know, this is happening. And for me personally, it's just meant that I've sort of been able to tick that box and go, yeah, I'm still being helpful. I'm still providing information that's useful. I'm not, you know, clearly I'm not going to be writing reviews and travel guides for the next little while. I have tentatively got a couple of UK breaks scheduled for later on in the year, but it's going to be a while before I'm traveling internationally again.
It'd be so nice if, like, during this time, while tourist destinations are either shut down or at very limited capacity, if they could spend this time creating universal design, if they could spend this time, like, you know, if everything's shut down, this is the time where you could actually, like, you know, put the elevators in, or like, and I know they're hurting for funds. I get that. I totally understand. But it would be so nice if this was the time that there could be huge grants given for spaces to create universal design.
Yeah, you're not the first person I've had this conversation with. So,
I don't doubt it. My big dream in life is that I could go back to college and become a city planner.
Yes.
Like, that's what I want to do, is become a city planner.
Burning that you wanted to ask me?
So many, but I'm going to start whimpering very soon. I didn't take my pain meds before we started talking. So I will start getting screechy and very giggly. My voice goes really high as I start hurting more, and we've gotten complaints about how high my voice can go during dislocations, and we'll try to keep this below, like, where dogs start running away. So I will say what you're doing is so important, because even if we're not traveling, a lot of us are still having to go out in the world, and it's everything you're talking about for travel also applies for public transportation. It applies for us just moving in our little world, and it's important to realize you could still get away a little bit, even safely, just the town over, or exploring. So thank you so much for everything you're doing. I really hope you are a reoccurring guest. I would love to have you on. I still have like half my questions, and I know if I start any of them, we'll talk for another hour.
Honestly, any time at all. Just
excellent. I've adored this time with you. Thank you so much. We are asking for, if you are wanting to support the podcast, Invisible Not Broken, we're now a network. Yay. We have 2 new podcast hosts coming on in the next 2 months. So that's really exciting. But if you are one of the people who wants us to have better transcription services, I get it. We're using free transcription services. Not ideal, not perfect. And we know it's needed. We can't afford it. So if you go to Patreon and support us, we can afford better transcription services. That's what we would be putting the money towards right now. So thank you so much, everyone. Be kind. It's never been more important to be gentle, and in whatever way it looks like to you, be a badass. And please go to our show notes. Carri Ann's, there'll be a little button at the very top that will be Carri Ann's website, and then I will link underneath it most of the stuff we've talked about, and I'll have links directly to the travel guides and the other guides I think you would definitely need, but just sign up for her newsletter. It's awesome. It's seriously one of the only ones I read all the way through. All right, everyone, have a great week. Thank you so much.